CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. Back in business, China's economy rebounds after the lifting of COVID restrictions. The news sent stock markets soaring.
Our other headlines: Greece's transport minister resigns following the train crash that killed 36 people. Police charge a station master near the city of Larissa with manslaughter.
Nigeria has a new president. The ruling party candidate Bola Tinubu wins, but the turnout was just 27%.
Britain's boardrooms are changing. The UK becomes a world leader for women's representation in top jobs, but are we still falling short?
And how your phone damages the planet. The tech industry's plans to cut its carbon footprint. We're in Spain at the world's biggest showcase. The Chinese economy is rebounding strongly after the lifting of COVID restrictions. Factory activity grew at its fastest rate in more than a decade in February.
With the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, or PMI, shooting to 52.6, up from 50.1 in January, it's far exceeded expectations and forecasts and is the highest reading since April 2012. Well, that news sent the stock markets in the region soaring, with Hong Kong's Hang Seng surging more than 4%. Shenzhen, Shanghai both rose around 1%. Dr. Xiaolin Chen is head of international at Crane Shares in London. Welcome to the programme, Dr. Chen. Good to see you. China's manufacturing activity at its strongest in over a decade. Put the figures into some kind of perspective, if you would.
Thank you for having me. Indeed, February's PMI surprised on the upside. Now China is returned to the expansionary territory. It's very good to see both manufacturing and non-manufacturing continue to expand, and now both beat market consensus. It's very, very interesting to notice production activity recovered very, very strongly. New orders, new export orders, even construction, and also you can see, some of the service sector also expand very fast. Overall, today's PMI is a signal of growing evidence of China's economy is recovering and recovering very strongly. It lends a lot of hope for a broader and a stronger economic rebound in China.
What do the figures mean for the country's post-pandemic recovery? Are we now in that post-pandemic recovery? Is COVID over? Have we got over it and moved on?
COVID is behind us. I think investors are looking at today's number as a reassurance from China's recovery. And also, I think today's PMI number also serves as a reconfirmation to Chinese policymakers. It reassures investors that China is recovering, rebound very strongly. This is, like you said, is highest number, highest reading for more than a decade. It reassures investors that the China has a very unique growth model, which its own domestic economy is sufficient enough to drive China's growth or China's rebound from here. It also, these figures add up very strong signals for economic rebound that put the Chinese policymaker in a good position ahead of the National People's Congress. I think now also a reconfirmation thus far for all the policy announced, either COVID relaxation, pro-growth policy directions are all working for the economy.
Let's look more widely, if we might. China needs the world needs China. Is there a concern in all of this that consumers in other countries might be cutting back because of their own domestic financial concerns?
China, last year, investors was largely surprised by how quickly China implemented the relaxation and quickly removed the restriction altogether. It's hugely welcomed by investors globally. And that's why you see some of the sectors in China, for instance, China internet sector, rebounded over 97% from the October of last year's bottom to the peak recently. It is a painful trade for some of the investors, as majority of the global fund managers on average underweight China over 410 basis points. If they look relative performance to their benchmark, it's painful for them to see how outperform, how quick it was. Global managers and investors are learning this in a hard way, that this is hurting their performance, but also they realizing and recognizing China is a strategic asset allocation in their portfolios. But now investors are staying very hopeful as Chinese companies are expecting to deliver strong fundamental earnings, and we expect policymakers to introduce more accommodative policies to help China to meet the needed growth target for above 5% for the next decades. I think investors are looking at the recent pullback as a position, as an opportunity to reposition back to China as an asset class.
Dr. Chen, good to see you. Thanks for coming on the show. Dr. Xiaolin Chen, Head of International at Crane Shares in London.
China has accused the European Union of abusing national security after the EU's decision to ban TikTok from official staff devices. China's foreign ministry said the move would dampen confidence in the EU's business environment. Brussels' announcement came a day after President Joe Biden ordered US federal agencies to delete the Chinese-owned app from all government-issued mobile devices. Prices in UK stores rose at their highest rate since 2005 in February, as the cost of living crisis showed little sign of easing for cash-strapped consumers. The British Retail Consortium said shop price inflation accelerated to 8.4%, a record for an index that started in 2005, and an increase from 8% in January. Food price increases hit 14.5%. UK home prices in February dropped 1.1%, their largest fall in more than 10 years. The decline shows signs of a slowdown in the housing market, as potential buyers feel the pinch of soaring prices and rising mortgages. Data from the Bank of England showed UK lenders approved the lowest number of mortgages in January since 2009. London's underground network will grind to a halt once again as unions announce their latest strike. The walkout will take place on March the 15th, the same day as the government outlines its national budget. It's the latest stoppage in a long-running dispute between workers, operators and the government over pensions and changes to working practices.
Greece's transport minister has resigned in the last few hours, and police have now charged a station master near the city of Larissa with manslaughter by negligence. This all following the worst train crash in the history of Greece. At least 36 people are now confirmed to have died and dozens more are injured. The collision happened as an intercity passenger train packed with mainly young travellers crashed head-on into a goods train. The first two carriages burst into flames and were almost completely obliterated. Rescue teams are continuing to work at the scene to try and free survivors.
Well, the train left Athens at 9:22 p.m. local time on Tuesday night, heading for Thessaloniki with around 350 passengers on board. The collision happened just before midnight outside the city of Larissa when it hit the goods train, which had set off from Thessaloniki and was travelling south on the same track. Well, our correspondent Evangelos Ipsas was one of the first journalists to arrive at the scene of the crash. We asked him how the rescue operation was proceeding.
Right behind me, as you can see, there is still the rescue mission ongoing. It's been happening since 2 a.m., the time that we got here. A number of personnel are on the ground with heavy machinery trying to clear the debris of those burned wagons from the trains, trying to find someone in perhaps whatever is left from those two carriages in the front. As you can see right now, there's only pieces of it left. There are people confirmed dead. 36 people are confirmed dead, and 2 dozens actually are in hospital right now. We also had word from one of the rescuers on the ground here that 42 people are still missing. 42 people are still stuck under that debris as we speak. So that is their next step right now, is to try to clear whatever is left and try to pull whoever they can out alive. But as time is going by, the hope for those people is fading away. The Greek Prime Minister, though, rushed to the scene quite fast to see and with his own eyes what it looks like and what is going on. Of course, the investigation is still ongoing. He did speak to the journalists. He did speak to a lot of the people around here who are covering it or working on the rescue mission, and he said that him and his government will do whatever they can to find what caused this incident. Let's have a look.
What we're experiencing today is very, very difficult as a country. We're talking about an unspeakable tragedy. Our thoughts today are first and foremost with the relatives of the victims. Our duty is to treat the injured and from there to identify the bodies. And then, one thing I can guarantee, we will find out the causes of this tragedy and do everything in our power to make sure it never happens again.
Well, the country's record has been quite low so far. The last large incident that the country had of trains colliding or going off track was back in 1972, where 21 people died actually in this area in Larissa. That was the last time we had a major incident in Greece. But this was quite bizarre, as both of these trains were traveling on the same track. Now, was that a malfunction? Was it a human error? They don't know. They're still investigating. But we have to also go back a little bit here, because there has been a lot of complaints from passengers on the train because the infrastructure of these tracks have been dilapidated. The OSE, which is the national railway company here in Greece, was bought in 2017 by the Italian state railway company, and ever since we haven't seen any upgrade. And that was the complaint just recently, a few months ago, or about a year ago actually. One of the workers for the company of OSE resigned because of safety issues. No one listened to him. They didn't take his concerns into consideration, but now they're investigating beyond not only this incident, but all the tracks that are owned and were renovated by the Italian state company. So now that is the next stage, to see whether whose fault it is, whether it was a human error or it was because of the dilapidated infrastructure. And of course, then they will try to find who was responsible, and then that would lead to whether those people will be tried and then taken. They need to face the consequences of this tragedy.
Well, China's President Xi Jinping has sent his condolences to Greece's president following the train collision. He also expressed sympathy to the families of the victims and said he hopes those injured can make a speedy recovery.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, breaking the glass ceiling, the increasing number of women in the UK's top jobs. But there is still a way to go.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliet Mann.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business here. A quick reminder, CGTN is available to watch for free on all of the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online at Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
The amounts you pay in tax might be going up if you're watching in the United States. President Joe Biden said that his March 9th budget proposal to the US Congress will include some higher taxes. Well, our correspondent John Terrett's in New York. So, John, some tax hikes on the way.
Yes, but we should not be surprised because Joe Biden's mantra is tax the rich, tax the rich, tax the rich, what he says all the time. And he said it as recently as the State of the Union address. Remember when both houses of Congress get together in the House of Representatives and the president makes an address to them? It's the State of the Union for most of those occasions, and it was 3 weeks ago. And he said it there as well, tax the rich, tax the rich. Now, yesterday he was at Virginia Beach, which is on the Atlantic coast of the state of Virginia, about 2 hours south of Washington, D.C. There's a big naval base just next door in Newport News, and he said it again. He said, I'm thinking of tax hikes when I get to my March budget. That's going to be released on March the 9th, and there's always a little bit of ceremony with this because we have the White House literally putting the budget in the back of a van and driving it up to Capitol Hill, where members of Congress take it from a room and they read it, and they then begin discussing the president's proposals for the next fiscal year. So he's saying he will only target billionaires. Robin and Jamie, he said no one earning less than $400,000 a year will pay a penny more in federal tax. I have to tell you, in America, $400,000 a year is still a lot of money. There are a lot of people who do not earn anything like that. And if I may just finish off by saying the biggest story here regarding Biden at the moment is his proposals to slash student debt by about 1/3. It's presently embroiled at the Supreme Court of the United States in Washington, D.C., and the signs are suggesting that the Supreme Court will block him from doing that. And the question before them is, do you free up student debt and allow those students who are heavily indebted to use that money to put back into the economy for better things? Or do you say to them, you took out the debt, you pay the debt down like everybody else has done in recent history? That's the question that they will have to answer. It's one of the headlines here involving Biden today. Jamie and Robin?
Well, John, let's talk about General Motors, which is calling itself GM, and it's cutting hundreds of jobs, isn't it?
Yeah, it is funny, really, because they made record profits in 2022. It's odd, that, isn't it, how these companies do this? The thing is, Robin, this is all about planning for the electric vehicle revolution, which we assume is coming. I mean, electric vehicles have had terrible press in the United States these last couple of days, because we had a big snowstorm in New York yesterday. We had to wait until the last day of February to get one. And everyone's electric vehicles up here kept dying. They couldn't run their radios, they couldn't run their heaters, and they were running out of battery, and there aren't enough chargers. Terrible press for electric vehicles. Anyway, General Motors insists that they'll be all electric by 2030 or 2035, something like that. So now they're laying off 500 white-collar workers. Doesn't sound very much when I tell you that they employ 58,000 white-collar workers and 46,000 people who actually bolt the vehicles together. That's 167,000 around the world, 97,000 here at home in the United States. And as I say, they did make record profits last year, but to be fair to them, they did say they were going to cut by $2 billion, and they're also going to limit their hiring, be very specific about who and when they hire to keep costs trim. In the meantime, General Motors shares are up today by just over 1%. I'm afraid when you trim staff, the shares go up.
There has been a change of tone on Wall Street, though, recently, hasn't there?
There has. For recent weeks, I've been telling you time and time again that Wall Street was at war with the Federal Reserve because Wall Street believed that the central bank was going to raise interest rates too far and too high and create a recession that Wall Street believed was unnecessary. That has changed, and the reason it's changed is that we've got companies reporting very, very cautious earnings. And in the last 48 hours, Target, which is a big box chain store, they'll sell you anything in a big box. They're actually a budget store these days. And Lowe's, which is a, what would you call it, like a DIY store, they've both been super cautious about their guidance going forward. Very, very cautious, and both predicting lower profits in 2023. So now Wall Street's woken up and said, oh, yeah, well, maybe there will be a recession then. And they think it's going to be light. They do think it's going to be light. And the idea is that inflation will come down, interest rates will stop rising by July, and then stocks and things like that will begin going back up again. That's the theory today. Now, at the moment, the Dow is up by about just under 1/5 of 1%. The other two are down. But what's interesting is the 10-year interest rate is at 4%. 4%, that's a lot. Normally, anything more than 3%, and it kills all the tech stocks over at the NASDAQ. They are down today, but 4% on the 10-year government bond is very high. Robin and Jamie.
John, thank you very much. Our correspondent John Terrett in New York.
The tech industry is thought to be responsible for nearly 4% of global greenhouse emissions, more than the entire air travel sector. With the huge energy demands of data storage and artificial intelligence, it's on course to consume 1/10 of the world's electricity within 3 years.
So what are companies doing to reduce their climate footprint? Our correspondent Ken Brown is at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona.
Phones, computers and other gadgets. The world produces over 50 million tons of e-waste each year, according to the United Nations Environment Programme. That's forecast to reach 75 million tons, while only 17% is currently recycled. At the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, activists are making their voices heard, saying pledges are not enough.
The commitment to net zero until 2050 is not enough, and it's not realistic at all. And the tech industry needs to change their policies and practices immediately.
The industry says things are changing. Some companies are designing phones that are easier to repair and making single components such as the camera upgradable without changing the phone. Industry leaders say they are taking notice.
Actually, we see quite a number of our members have got targets that are faster than 2050. So there is something called the European Green Digital Coalition, and a number of our European members are members of the European Green Digital Coalition. They actually have targets that are at least 2040.
To achieve net zero in an industry where most of the environmental damage is already done before the consumer even opens the packaging is a huge challenge. Precious metals and materials like gold and lithium need to be mined to continually mass produce these devices year on year. One area that may help reduce the carbon footprint is rising demand for cheaper reconditioned phones. Europe's used phone market is set to double in size by 2030 to over $14 billion. Companies like Janado in Germany say consumer habits have changed, but recycling efforts are often hampered by manufacturers.
We hope in the future that the big brands make it easier to recycle like small items of the smartphone, because at the moment they just use glue for the screws, and it makes it really difficult just to open the phones and to recycle them.
Mobile manufacturers insist they are looking towards a more sustainable economy across all sectors. But in an industry that still produces over 1.3 billion devices a year, there is still a long way to go.
And we can talk to Ken Brown at that Mobile World Conference in Barcelona now. Ken, as you've outlined, it's obviously a huge problem. What are the big phone companies telling you there? What are the tech firms saying?
Yes, hi Jamie. It's day 3 of the Mobile World Congress here. And one of the words we've been hearing a lot over the past few days is sustainability. Now, we're here live with Stephen Rose from IBM. He's going to tell us about about how the tech industry can become greener in the future. Stephen, thank you so much for speaking to us today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
So tell us, how can the telco industry become greener despite the sheer volume of stuff that it produces each year?
Yeah, I mean, first off, we need to understand that conscious consumerism and the way in which people want to procure goods going forward is right at the centre of the concern of, as I said, consumers, but also the suppliers and the vendors from within the industry. So two things are happening. One is consumers and buyers want to ensure that the products and services that they buy are sustainable and ethical at the same time. And secondly, from within the industry, of course, there's pressure on the vendor community across the value chain to ensure that they comply themselves to different standards of ethical and sustainable products and services. So a lot of pressure from all sides to make sure that that happens.
And of course, we're not just talking about mobile phones, tablets, TVs. When you look at the future, things like AI are hugely power hungry. So how can the industry balance growth with a lower carbon footprint?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a huge demand from all the vendors in the community. So if we think about the devices at the edge, they're becoming more battery efficient. They're using more sustainable materials that are procured, again, in more sustainable ways than the way that those are shipped. Then if we think about the network itself, it's becoming redistributed, re-architected, and in such a way that allows them to be able to run the performance of, run the workloads of high performance applications, and also the handsets themselves. And again, those are being done in a more ethical and sustainable way. So there's no question that every player in the industry actually comes to play their part and come together as a total.
So tell me, what are the key innovations that are going to help big tech move towards net zero?
Yeah, so cloud is definitely one of them. The more clouds you have, the more you can distribute the workloads between different clouds. Then it's the automation between those clouds, of course. Again, you can move workloads dynamically. And the third one is edge compute. So again, there's lots of ways in which we can do that. We're making great advancements on those particular technologies, and the industry is coming together as a wonderful ecosystem to make that happen too.
Stephen Rose, thank you so much for speaking to us today. There you have it, the future of tech and green technology. Ken Brown from Mobile World Congress.
Ken, thanks for that. Our correspondent, Ken Brown.
Britain's boardrooms are changing. The UK has become a world leader for women's representation on top company boards. A new government survey reveals that women's share of executive seats at the UK's 350 biggest listed companies has passed 40% for the first time. Bringing talented women to top-tier positions is part of a drive to improve boardroom diversity and corporate culture, with women's board representation increasing by nearly 3% in 2022. The number of women in leadership positions at FTSE 350 companies also increased to 33.5%. But while women make up more than half of the UK workforce, they remain underrepresented in key executive roles, occupying less than a quarter of those positions. Well, Denise Wilson is Chief Executive of the FTSE Women Leaders Review. Good to have you with us, Denise. So this looks like progress for women in boardrooms, but is it really? Why do we even need a target in the first place?
Well, if we go all the way back to where this big drive started, which is 2011, women represented just 9% of FTSE 350 board positions. So clearly, for many years, women have been more than 50% of our graduates, make up 50% of the population, 50% of the workplace, but we're not getting to the top under their own steam, under free will of corporates to the very senior positions. So this initiative, which is a business-led voluntary initiative, the UK government supported it, and we decided to go ahead and set voluntary targets, and the model has worked for the UK. It's driven huge progress in just a decade, from 9% up to 40% today. That's the third target that we've set in the decade. And are delighted on behalf of British business and all stakeholders who've worked hard to achieve this, and of course the women who've put themselves forward, that we celebrate 40% women on FTSE boards just this week.
But as you point out, women are obviously roughly half the population. Is the target of 40% ambitious enough?
Well, we intentionally set the target at 40%, not 50%, so as not to ask business to over-engineer, over-manage their top teams. So it's actually a minimum of 40% either men or women in their top teams, which is typically the top 80 to 100 roles in any FTSE 350 listed companies. And we, with the expectation that we could have 60% women on FTSE boards, why not? So it's, that is intentional. It's about gender balance. It's not about managing around a very fixed number, but 60-40 of either gender feels like that's gender balance.
So progress in the boardroom then, but less progress on promoting women to leadership positions below board level, and that's a problem, isn't it?
Well, it's not a problem, but yes, clearly we have made less progress there, and there's more to do. The drive for women in leadership, which is the two layers below the board, the exec committee and direct reports, that started some 5 years later than the board, so that didn't really start until 2016 when the first target was set. So that's been going a little bit less time. We have made good progress there year on year. Almost every single metric in that leadership layer moves forward. And I think the very good news is that we have a model that works. We have the voluntary business-led model that's worked very well for British business. This is, we've got increasing numbers, and this is no longer a fringe kind of hushed water cooler conversation that it was for much of my career. It's now a core and critical business topic, and the vast majority of big companies are seriously behind this now and making good progress.
So voluntary targets here in the UK, but the EU has mandatory targets for bringing more women into boardrooms. Is that the right approach?
Well, look, I think what we've shown over the years, actually, is that both approaches can work, and it's important to choose a model that suits your business. We felt very much that British business could get behind this and like to do things under a comply or explain regime, as opposed to fines, penalties that have driven progress in other countries. And we're second to France, which now has 33% on the CAC 40 on just 40 boards. And we're at 40. So I think, and they have driven their progress exactly that way through quotas and fines and penalties. So I think what this does show today is that both models can work actually and equally drive progress. In the UK, we're doing this at scale. So not 40 companies, we're monitoring 350. And this year, for the first time, we brought the top 50 private companies, the largest private companies in the UK, into scope as well. So now monitoring 400 companies, 30,000 leadership roles, and making progress. We've got a way to go. Of course, we've got a way to go. And I think what we have seen through the decade is that real and lasting change takes time. But, you know, what has been achieved in British boardrooms is really in the decade revolutionary. But there's much more to go for. And that's what we've learned. That's what we've seen, particularly, as you say, in the layers for women below the board, where the main focus needs to be now. We've got 3 years to go until the 2025 target for 40%. And I think bigger gains are yet to come.
Denise, great to talk to you. Thanks for sharing your thoughts today. That's Denise Wilson from the FTSE Women Leaders Review.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Nigeria has a new president, but voter turnout was just 27%. We're in Lagos next.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference. Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities, reinvent, find new opportunities, discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference?
Brazen axe.
The difference is in the detail, the background,
defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story. Wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories back in business. China's economy rebounds following the lifting of coronavirus restrictions. The news sent stock markets soaring. Our other headlines: Greece's transport minister resigns following the train crash that killed 36 people. Police charge a station master near the city of Larissa with manslaughter.
Nigeria's Bola Tinubu has been declared the country's new president-elect in a vote that's been disputed by opposing parties. Tinubu, from the ruling All Progressives Congress Party and a former governor of Lagos State, won 37% of the vote. Opposition parties say the results are flawed and have called for the head of the Electoral Commission to resign. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Deji Badamosi in Lagos. So, Deji, what do we know about the new president-elect Bola Tinubu?
Well, what we know is that he's a popular politician, of course studied in the United States of America, and he came back and contested for the Senate. He was a senator at some point and then became governor of Lagos for 2 terms. That's for 2 terms of 4 years. So he did 8 years as governor of Lagos, and he's credited with transforming the city into what it is at the moment. Now he's very, very influential and has been quite instrumental in choosing who becomes governor in Lagos State. He's also a powerful politician in the ruling All Progressives Congress. So he has a huge and wide political network, and all of that, all of that is credited for his rise to the top position of the country today. So he's very much well known and really popular.
But voter turnout in this election was just 27%, which is the lowest since 1999. Does Tinubu really have the mandate to run what's Africa's most populous country?
Well, the Constitution does not specify any threshold at all to validate a presidential election. So the election was conducted in compliance with the Constitution and the Electoral Act. Obviously, he has the mandate, and he's also said he's going to be the president of all. There's no question at all that turnout was indeed low. Everyone had expected the turnout to be better, but then the highest Nigeria had ever done in terms of turnout was in 2003, when Nigeria attained about 69% turnout. But from that period to this year, to 2023, the turnout has been going down. And some people have said part of the reasons is because the election is getting more and more technology-oriented. Technology has been brought in, and so you're beginning to have less and less of fraud in terms of voter registration. But no question at all that turnout in this election was very low, especially when you consider the fact that over 80 million voters now over 80 million persons, I should say, were eligible to vote in this election. But what we have at the moment, not up to a third of that number actually turned out to vote.
And there have been some allegations of voting irregularities made by opposition candidates, haven't there? How likely is it that those will be investigated or that there will be a recount?
Well, the opposition candidates have said they are going to go to court, that they're heading to court. They've made that announcement. So it's only the court that can, order a recount if it deems it necessary, and of course can even decide to nullify the election altogether. But other than that, no one can do it, not even the Independent National Electoral Commission, that's the election regulator in this country. So we'll just have to wait for the court to decide. So the opposition candidates have obviously said they're heading to court, and I think they're going to do so because they are really not happy with the outcome.
Deji, thank you very much. Our correspondent Deji Badamosi in Lagos.
China's President Xi Jinping has met his Belarusian counterpart in Beijing. It's the first visit by President Alexander Lukashenko to China since the two countries upgraded diplomatic relations last year. Bilateral ties in trade, as well as finance and tourism, were all on the agenda, but the Ukraine conflict was also discussed. Our correspondent Yang Chongxi is in Beijing.
President Xi said China's position has been consistent and clear, advocating for a peaceful resolution of the conflict through political means and the discarding of Cold War mentalities. He called upon irrelevant countries to end their politicization of global economy and politics and focus on resolving the crisis. President Lukashenko agreed with China's position. Now, the meeting concluded with the signing of a joint statement on the all-weather comprehensive strategic partnership and the witnessing of the signing of cooperation documents, as you said, spanning trade, industry, agriculture, and tourism. Now, President Lukashenko also met with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang today. Premier Li talked about the complementary advantages of the two countries And on the other hand, President Lukashenko affirmed that the cooperative relationship between China and Belarus is intended to benefit both peoples and is not aimed against any outside parties.
Foreign ministers from the United States and Russia are gathering at a G20 meeting in India. Representatives from all countries, including China, have been arriving in New Delhi for 2 days of talks, with Ukraine expected to dominate discussions. Our correspondent Radhika Bajaj reports.
The Foreign Secretary of the country held a press conference today where he acknowledged that while India does want to focus on issues that are priorities for developing countries, the Russia and Ukraine conflict is top of mind when it comes to the delegations that have come not just from the G20 countries, but also other invited nations. And right behind me, in fact, is the President's house, or the Rashtrapati Bhavan, where currently a lot of these parties are actually coming face to face. There's a networking dinner and reception underway. Now, on day one, which is today, we've already seen a slew of bilateral talks that have taken place. Sergei Lavrov has met with his Indian counterpart, Dr. S. Jaishankar. We've also had India holding bilaterals with the UK, Argentina, Mexico and others. But of course, it is the Ukraine-Russia issue that is top of mind, with Russia even issuing a statement earlier saying that, while it does want to talk about the issues that India is highlighting, which is issues of, increased debt, food and energy security, etc. It will also mention in particular the U.S. sanctions and how they are depriving poor countries of socio-economic development. So it is certainly top of mind, and we are expecting that tomorrow, when the groups meet together for the sessions where everyone is going to be face to face, there will be talk of the conflict for sure.
Questions are being asked in Italy over delays in the rescue response after a boat carrying migrants and refugees sank on Sunday, killing at least 67 people. Families of the victims have been paying their respects.
Our correspondent Johannes Fleshberger is in southern Italy. Johannes, the relatives have been allowed to see the coffins for the first time.
Yes, exactly. Since the morning hours in this sports facility in the southern Italian city of Crotone, relatives, survivors, but also locals were able to see these over 60 coffins that are placed in the middle of this sports hall. It's quite hard to see these coffins, especially because a lot of them are for children, the very small coffins. And just today, the 67th victim that was confirmed by authorities, it was known that it is a girl. So also, meanwhile, investigations continue against 3 suspected traffickers. We now know that one of them is a 50-year-old Turk and the other is a 25-year-old Pakistani. The third one, they didn't explain what nationality, but the third one is 17 years old. And what seems to be shocking for the Italians is that how brutal and careless these traffickers apparently are about human life. As soon as the engine on the boat started to smoke, these 3 suspected traffickers apparently inflated a dinghy and left the boat, abandoning those 200 migrants. And it's not the first migrant shipwreck that happened in southern Italy, but it does feel quite different because it's definitely the second worst in the history of the country. And given those numbers of now 67 dead and more to come because they're still missing migrants, this is quite heavy also on the community here.
So, Johannes, what criticism is the government facing over the way this has been handled?
Well, the response by rescuers has been very slow and delayed. Apparently, Frontex spotted the boat in the late evening on the day before. It took several hours until rescue organizations and police organizations were intervening. Now we know that at 4:30 in the morning, 2 policemen found the pieces of the boat that were left on the beach already, and those 2 policemen were able to save the 2 first migrants, and they found 17 bodies right away. Now then in total they were able to save 80 migrants alive. Meanwhile, the Coast Guard, who is responsible for such rescue operations, said, why are we responsible? We didn't know it was an emergency. There was no alert for rescue. And they also said the rules are very complicated about when and how we intervene. So there are a lot of debates going on and accusations as well why this happened.
Johannes Pleshberger in southern Italy, thank you very much.
Finnish MPs have voted through plans to accelerate the country's accession to NATO. The result, which was overwhelmingly endorsed by lawmakers in Helsinki, means the country could join NATO as early as April after the general election. However, Finland's accession, along with that of neighbouring Sweden, is currently being blocked by NATO member countries Hungary and Turkey.
A wave of poisonings of schoolgirls in Iran has forced parents to take their children out of school. Some politicians say the suspected attacks are being carried out by groups opposed to girls' education. The Health Ministry said hundreds of girls in different schools have suffered what it described as mild poisoning in recent months. Many of those affected have been treated in hospital. An investigation into the poisonings is underway.
Police have fired stun grenades at protesters in Israel during a day of action against the government's judicial reform plans. Mounted officers tried to stop people breaching barricades in Tel Aviv as demonstrators blocked roads across the country. The government accused the protesters of being anarchists.
Turkey's President Erdogan has signalled that elections will be held earlier than planned on May the 14th. Some had suggested they would be postponed after last month's earthquakes. Erdogan's ruling AK Party has pledged to build 1.5 million new apartments to rehouse those left homeless by the quakes. But his government has been heavily criticised by opposition parties over its slow response to the disaster.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, toasting the trade deal that protected Chinese and European products like champagne and pu'er tea. We're in Paris. Next.
Roger, Ricky, last curve.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
Awesome!
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities, reinvent, find new opportunities, discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
As China embarks on a new journey of modernization, the National People's Congress, China's top legislature, and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, the top political advisory body, convened their annual sessions in early March. Join us on CGTN for our special coverage of the two sessions. Find out the course China will take to ensure a sustainable future for its 1.4 billion people, and how China's decisions will impact global economic recovery. Agenda for 1.4 billion on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe.
Now, how can you be sure that your champagne is the real stuff from France and your cup of pu'er tea is genuinely from southwest China? Well, today marks the second anniversary of that trade deal between China and the EU that protects regional products that come from a specific location. It's called the Geographical Indications Agreement, and that traceability of products deal is set to be widened. Our correspondent Catherine Drew is at a rather noisy Paris agricultural show, quite near the bar by the look of it.
Yeah, I'm afraid in this hall, which shows the finest of French produce, you're never far from a bar, Jamie. I think you would quite like it. If you wanted a glass of Châteauneuf de Pape, or you wanted some cider from Normandy, some cheese, all with geographical indicators, this is the place to come. And I have to say, the smell really hits you when you get in here, people enjoying themselves. So today, as you mentioned, we are marking that 2 years of the agreement between the EU and China on those GI, the geographical indicators. France actually has its own deal with China, and over 60 of its products are recognized, and some of them are here, and of course it has an exchange with Chinese products as well. Now, as you mentioned, authenticity of GI and traceability of all products is a big talking point, and we've been finding out about a new technology that helps with that. Let's take a look. Well-known wines and cheeses, including those with special GI or geographical indicators, just some of France's many delicacies in global demand and showcased this week at Paris's annual Salon de l'Agriculture. From wines to cheeses, all sorts of products here. How can suppliers and consumers be sure they're getting what they pay for and how the product has been made? That's where blockchain technology can play a role.
The blockchain tech, it's to do traceability. So you can trace, in the finance or in the crypto world, but basically you can trace any kind of data. So for us, the basic use of the blockchain, it's to capture information and to ensure they are in the blockchain, so they are secure in the blockchain. Nobody can delete it or modify, because of the blockchain.
Today's food and drink producers must adhere to their government's corporate social responsibility, or CSR policies, which ensure social and environmental concerns are addressed.
First of all, it was a consumer concern, so it's more about communication and marketing concern, but not only, because now our clients are using the traceability data to ensure, the commitment of CSR, their commitment of CSR, and to prove, to the final customer, they are truly, on this way to do a good impact on the planet.
Crystal Chain has customers across Europe. One is Cordier Wines, based in France's Bordeaux region. There's a limit on how much information can fit on a label, so a QR code can let consumers know much more about the product.
The beauty of blockchain for me is really to reconnect the one who make the wine to the one who drink the wine. Because there is a gap between the one who made the wine and the one who drink the wine. Now with blockchain, we don't have any gap anymore.
And do you think it's helping sales? Or no?
I hope.
From deforestation, chemical use to water consumption, many believe blockchain technology will be further expanded across the wider business world as demand grows for openness and accountability. So those GI agreements, also this issue of traceability, both areas where countries can work together and really exchange ideas and cooperation. And on that theme of cooperation, we've been speaking to Paul Offray. Now, he is a pig producer. He is also the president of France's Institute for Pork. And we discussed pork earlier in the week. Of course, it's a key export for France. It's also a key import for China and lots of other countries around the world. And Mr. Paul Offray has been talking to us about cooperation and how China and France can work together to get the best out of the industry. Let's hear what he said.
In France and Europe, we've had great farming development for 30 years, but in the 90s, we started to see the dark side of that production. Water pollution and air pollution forced us to question ourselves about these methods. Since then, we are trying to correct it with technology. We fixed the water pollution issue. We are correcting the problem of ammonia in the air. We worked a lot on improving animal welfare. Now we are focusing on decarbonising our industry as much as we can. It's a known fact. Carbon leads to global warming, so we need to keep working in this green direction. Because of COVID, trade slowed down with China. Since we're almost back to normal, we are trying to revive our professional and business relationships to help the development of pig farms in China. We know that China needs to produce at home to feed the Chinese people. In France, we can't produce and export that much meat, but we are able to help and share our knowledge on this and guide China while they are developing this industry there. Technology is a great tool, but technology without help from experts can't help. That could take us back in time to some darker ways to produce meat. So support is as important as technology here.
L'accompagnement est aussi important.
So that was the thoughts of Paul Offray, who is a pig farmer, also the president of France's Institute for Pork, having some discussion there about cooperation between the two countries. Tomorrow I'll be back again, and I will be talking about wine. Until then, goodbye.
Look forward to it. Catherine, thank you very much. Our correspondent Catherine Drew in Paris.
Well, another product protected by that agreement is a Chinese herbal medicine that's used to treat coughs and colds. It's known as Fuchang Maidong and comes from Sichuan province. Our correspondent Guo Tianqi reports.
The roots of Maidong, a perennial herb, are a common traditional Chinese medicine widely used to treat colds and coughs, and has been used for more than 2,000 years. Santai County in Mianyang, southwest China's Sichuan province, is known as the hometown of Fucheng Maidong. It's listed under what's known as the China-EU Agreement on Geographical Indications, which came into force in 2021.
Santai has been growing Maidong for more than 500 years. It is the sandy soil that found alongside the bank of the Fujiang River can nurture the best Maidong in the whole country. And the production is said to be the highest and the most consistent.
February and March are the busiest seasons for medical farmers every year. After harvesting the roots, the remainder of the plant is placed back into the soil immediately to ensure next year's production. The China-EU agreement provides legal and intellectual property protection for products like Fucheng Maidong. It helps to ensure that prices don't drop because of imitation products sold on overseas markets. That means it has become a key to wealth for locals.
People now have improved brand awareness. We are supervising each other to ensure we all follow green production instruction. For example, use organic fertilizers and interplant bitter melon and garlic in Maidong field to drive away pests.
After strict management and standardized production, the quality of Maidong continues to improve. In order to ensure customers get the products of the same quality, storage and logistics are also comply with international standards.
Our Maidong is not only popular with domestic pharmaceutical companies, but also exported to Southeast Asia and then re-exported to Europe and other places from Japan and South Korea.
Maidong output here in Santai accounts for 70% of the total output of the whole country and 80% of the total exports. As one of the major industries, this product identified by China and the EU for special protection is helping the development of this place in a healthier way. Guo Tianqi, CGTN, Mianyang, Sichuan Province.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all the team here in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.